We're out here at the back of the decoy, between the decoy wood and the duck decoy itself. I'm here to talk about this year's breeding season, some of the successes that we've seen on the back of the management work that we do. So I'd like to talk about that. So one of the great successes through this year's breeding season has been Gadwall. The dabbling ducks in particular have done very well. We've seen many broods appearing around the reserve. We manage lots of areas out there for them to ensure that there's emergent vegetation for those tiny little ducklings. And in particular, a lot of the habitat that was created for amphibians and dragonflies, we're finding that they're absolutely brilliant nurseries for the young ducklings. The females are hatching the young off, taking them to these sites, and once they're big enough, moving out into some of the wider water areas. And I think we're around at least 60 fledged Gadwall on the reserve, and it's very likely to be more than that, with a few broods hidden away in places where we might not have seen them of late. So really successful season for that species. Another species we're going to talk about is our cranes. We've got the 5 breeding pairs which are established here around the site. There's another pair or another individual or 2 plus visiting birds that come in to the site, but 5 pairs nested this year. We've managed to rear 2 young to fledging, which is really good. So on the back of last year's 4 fledged young, another 2 this year. One pair in particular, Wendy and Albert, you can probably see them moving backwards and forwards between the Dumbles and the fields to the north. With the wheat and some of the crops ripening now, you might find them wandering around in those. But a good season for the cranes. Now, if you've visited us through the spring and the summer months, you would have noticed avocets. We've got lots of them around the scrapes, around 60 to 70 breeding pairs. A couple of sites, they're really established, so the South Lake and the Rushy, we've got birds that nest there year after year now. They do try and breed on other islands that we've created for them around the site. But the really notable thing this year, we did rear around 20 young to fledging across the site. But they formed up this huge super flock, and once the young were old enough to fly, they all headed out to the Severn estuary, and you could see these birds feeding on that lovely Severn mud out there. And they were here for a good 5-6 weeks, using the Severn estuary as their main site each day. So a wonderful sight to see all of those avocets together, a real success story. Also like to talk about a very special bird, the bittern. We've got bitterns on site. We see them through the winter months. If you go back 30 years, we never had any reeds, very little emergent vegetation around the site. So we didn't really have the habitat to be able to offer bitterns a home. So on the back of the conservation measures across the country, other organisations have put a lot of work in as well. Bittern population has increased massively. I'm really pleased to say that after a few years of having booming birds around the site, bitterns have actually bred this year. Had a sighting of a juvenile. Couldn't fly too well, so was very recently fledged, and we're still seeing sightings of birds dotted around the reserve. They're quite mobile, they can pop up anywhere and of course disappear, but brilliant to have that species breeding here. It's going to be a great time through the autumn now to catch up with some of those young birds, those juveniles which have fledged there. Many of them will stay around the reserve locally, and you'll also be able to catch up with a lot of those migrant birds which are passing through the site, stopping off here perhaps to molt, to feed before moving on.